Or maybe I should start recording one. I used to.
Perfect. I can see some nice pyramid on your back. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
The flip chart.
Yeah, flip chart.
Ah, warm welcome. These things from your programs.
Yeah, I just store them here. I have basically 3 or 5 places where I can store my. So you see here,
nice. That's
there are about
really nice.
100 of flip charts. Those are the English ones. That's the German ones. That's the program specific or the company specific ones, and that's the ones I want to use next.
That's fabulous. My God, you're so systematic.
Well, I guess you need to if you want to reuse your flip charts.
Yeah, and you're resisting using slide decks and stuff. You work much more with flip charts too.
Actually, I started with slides, and I'm now coming back to flip charts because it's just much more personal.
Yeah, true. A lot of people say that, do that. Yeah. So to give you a little bit of brief about this research. So I've told you, I think we met after I started my master's, right? In organization development from Metanoia. And it is a master's which takes Gestalt, systemic, complexity, the whole anti-mainstream approach towards change management, etc. And I've finished my 2 years this July. July was the last module, and now I'm in the research phase. And my research topic is based on my own lived experiences and what I've gone through the last couple of years, but more significantly the last 7-8 months. With some amazingly, things that happened that really shook me quite tremendously over the last few months. And that's where I thought, okay, this is so interesting. I'm in the field of leadership development where, we do leadership development in so many different ways, which is competency-based and so on. I am interested in looking at what is the impact of significant life events on leadership perspectives. So that is, where it started, and I created a research proposal which I submitted like a week back. And I thought instead of speaking to, generally somebody who's had a life event in terms of, which might have changed their perspective on, how their leadership manifests, I should actually talk to people who are into leadership development, so not just leaders, but also people who are supporting other leaders to develop leadership skills, and whom I know have, at either sooner or, at an earlier stage in life, gone through significant life events. You came to my mind because of, your son. I thought that, that is a significant life event for you whenever it happened. And I was curious to think, okay, how might that have changed the way you looked at leadership? So that is where, and I know other people going through other significant life changes, might be a change in relationship, a divorce, or a long-term sickness, or emptiness syndrome. I mean, all of these, many, typically in midlife and after, a lot of significant life events that people go through. And the leadership, thinking that I'm looking at in relation to that is something called as vertical leadership development. Have you heard of that?
No.
The work of Bill Tobert, and he did some work with Action Logics. I don't know if you've come across that. He actually, instead of a lot of leadership development work, which you and I do, which is much more around the competency development and skill development, that's considered as horizontal leadership development. And vertical leadership development is much more around how your worldview changes. So it's really linked to mental models. And they have a whole, let me see if I can find that paper. Yeah, so they have these various, they call it action logics, and this is how it looks like. So they have these various action logics that, that actually help you to understand how is it that people view the world. So there are things like opportunist, diplomat, expert, achiever, individualist, strategist, alchemist. Alchemists are people like Mandela and Gandhi, tiny part of the population. And then strategists are 8%, tons of individualists. Achievers is the most profiled, almost 40% of people in organizations who are successful leaders are in the achiever profile, etc. So all of those have different manifestations. Now, of course, my ideal state would have been to see, the ideal research for me, as I would have imagined, would have been to see that you are at a particular way of, your leadership perspective is at a particular way, and then a significant event happens, and then how does it change? But in reality, I cannot work with a research like that. So I'm doing this much more what I call as the human science approach, which is something that Metanoia introduced to me, which is around action inquiry, first person and second person. And the idea is that you do not necessarily start with a theory. You can have various theories, like I have this theory at the back of my head around vertical development. But you don't really start with that. You start with conducting in-depth interviews with people. And people that you think, might be in some way that you strategically choose. And it doesn't need to be too many. It can be 3 or 4 people, apparently. And you speak with them and you interview them, and once you have interviewed, let's say 4 of them, then you identify the patterns that you see across, what people have been saying. And you try to, categorize them and put some boundaries on them and make some sense of them. And that sense making then may be related to some theory, but it's really the other way around. You start with the raw data and then, now I'm very new to this. I've not done this. I'm going to do this for the very first time. And in fact, you are the very first person that I'm interviewing. But first of all, I'm just giving you an idea of what it is, because I don't want to jump into an interview today necessarily. I just wanted to tell you what is the broad idea, and then see if, if that might be of something of interest to you, because according to the process, and, I'm led by the process and what I'm reading, because I've never done that before, I would be interviewing you 2 or 3 times in iterations. So I would interview, let's say 4 different people 2 or 3 times. And each time after one round of interview, I, make sense of the data. And the next time I interview you, I give you a broad picture of what is the data that I'm accumulating. And then I interview you again. And then I interview you again. That's how it works. Now, I, as I said, I'm not sure how to categorize that data, I'm not even sure what does this in-depth interview mean, because they are not saying that you go with, in a typical research, the way I used to do it when I did my first master's, you would have a structured questionnaire and you would ask the same questions to different people. And usually it was quantitative analysis. So it was much larger sample groups, 50 people or something like that. This is a very different way to do it. You, of course, would be much more, aligned to that way of thinking with your Ashridge thing. And I don't know, how much you buy into the whole Ralph Stacey, social constructionism and, all of that. So I'm curious to know what are your first thoughts when you hear that, Anton?
It sounds interesting. It sounds familiar. I know from a couple of friends who worked similarly to that. They called it action research. Mm. So yeah, you start at a point and you get as a researcher part of the process, and you drive the process while you are in the process, and you learn, reflect, and sounds all good. So just while you were introducing the theme, I started already to think in parallel about what to say and whether this all makes sense to me. I have the need of just understanding a few boundaries like confidentiality. So I assume that your interviewees will not be named with
and everything
names?
that is written in the research will be first sent to you, and you would say, yes, that is fine. So I would just say number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. But the reason I record is because I need to transcribe the interviews. And this is not the interview, by the way. I think we will have that at a later stage. But I need to transcribe the interview. And then bits of the interview that I will actually put in the research, I need to send it to you. I need to also send you something called as a consent form that you sign that actually specifies the ethics of the whole research. And the bits where I would, let's say, quote, where I might take a verbatim quote, that's something that I'll send to you. And only if you feel comfortable with that, I'm allowed to even put it in. Otherwise, I need to do that at a much less granular level. So really at a pattern level. And I can imagine that usually at a pattern level will be sufficient. It might be only something, some nuggets that you say that is very insightful that I would like to quote verbatim. And that I would. So anything that is written and that is published, because obviously the research will be published on Middlesex and whatever, you would give consent to that, and only if you feel comfortable with that, then that would go on. And there is absolutely no need to identify your sample in this kind of research. So action research is a bit different as far as I understand from action inquiry. In this action inquiry process, what I'm doing first is what I have been doing over the last few years. I have a coach/therapist, and I have been, going through my own process. And I have actually, for my own understanding, and I also thought sometimes, this is such fascinating conversations I have with her. I have been recording it. Even before I thought I would ever use it, I have been recording it. So I have probably recordings from the last 2 odd years of these bi-weekly then, and sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly sort of conversations. So I will definitely be going through some of my own recordings. The other thing that I've been doing is journaling, extensive journaling actually over the last few years. I've been doing journaling for many more years, but I think after I became independent, it's become much more regular. I almost have needed to journal. So using that, and so that is the first part of the research that I need to do around really understanding my own process and how has my own perspective evolved around what I believe is leadership and effective leadership. And then, but of course, always linked to the significant life events, right? Like for me, it was around the first significant life event professionally for me was going back from my maternity leave to this organization, Amcor, to be told that the job doesn't exist. And I was headhunted into that job. So that was like, the first shock because I was also in a way, on this high potential pool and all of that, so I had this amazingly different identity about myself. And then something, drastic happened. Which also took me then to spirituality and Buddhism, but I was still less ready to let go of the corporate safety. So I still took a job with Syngenta, and, which was a great time. And Syngenta is a big client for me. So that was great. But I already knew that I wanted to do something different. And in the recent past, there have been, other things that have happened more at a personal relationship level. With my husband. So I think those are, multiple significant events that I have been going through and processing, which I think are impacting my worldview and pushing me through these, various stages of adult development. Because the thinking is that till the way you look at the world makes sense to you, in your current way of living, you need not think of another way of looking at the world. It's only when your current way of looking at the world stops serving you and your life events push you, towards something else, then you go to, at least in this action logic model, that's what it says, then you start looking at another way of looking at the world. So that's where I am. I need to do a little bit more research myself around how I would structure the interview and how these different cycles would work, because at this moment I'm still very much in the space of reflecting on my own process rather than going to other people. All I'm doing now with you and a couple of other people that I know is to introduce what this is, see, how ready or not ready you might be to engage in this. And then I would arrange for this starting November or something, maybe a call or 2 calls in November and maybe 1 in December, something like that, 2 or 3 iterations. And each time maybe, I'm guessing like 90 minutes or something like that. So you would invest, half a day across these 3 calls. And of course I would arrange it at a time that would be convenient for you.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm fine to do that. Yeah.
I mean, I know about your son, but there might be, of course, other significant life events, that have shaped and that keep shaping your leadership development, your leadership perspective. It's not even development, but your perspective on, how one can be leading. And you can have a broader definition of leading, right? I mean, it can be leading in the way that you define it. I would define, in my literature research, in my literature review, of course, I'm defining leadership in various ways and understanding in leadership in various ways. But when I interview you, I would, of course, try to understand from your perspective, what do you consider as leadership? And then how has, that shifted, or how is that shifting? Because, of course, you might be also in the process of that. If I remember correctly, did you tell me that you also have a coach or a therapist that you have been processing for some years? Is that right? And you also mentioned something like hypnotherapy, right? Yeah. I think that's what I remembered from our last conversations. Yeah. So yeah, there might be quite some insightful things that come out of that. I don't know. Do you have somebody? Do you actually know somebody, Antoine, that you can connect me with, who has done something similar? Because I'm still trying to get my head around. I will get all this raw data, and then what will I do with it? It's like even though cognitively I seem to understand, okay, categorize, and I just wanted to speak to somebody who might have done it, and who can give me some points.
As a piece of research?
Somebody who has done action research, who went with this raw data and not starting with a theory and a hypothesis, which is usually how social science research is done, but actually started with raw data and see what emerges to that. I thought you said that you might know somebody who has done something like that. And I just want to, connect with somebody who's done something like that.
There's one colleague and friend of mine in the UK, Ty Francis.
Oh, Ty, I know.
So yeah. I think, of course, that Ty has put a lot of thinking into leadership, and he has done many things like constellations,
yeah.
And he's been doing his PhD.
Intuition.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm just I think that he might, especially if you know him, that he might be a person to look at this more emergent research, because he's a lot into it. Not into having only a structured approach to research, but also more emergent.
Definitely. I think that's a great idea. Ty was actually in our first year, he was a guest lecturer for, what did he talk about? I think presence or something like that. One of these modules on, I think it was presence. Oh, no, field. field theory. He spoke about Lewin and all these people on the field theory. So that's how I got to know him. And then there is one or two people. Oh, you introduced me to Malvika, you remember? Malvika has used Thai quite extensively, so I knew about him even before that. Yeah, but I'll definitely talk to Thai. I had actually forgotten about Thai, so I think that would be great to talk to him, because he, of course, he's not in any way now connected in our research or tutoring or anything. So he's sort of, he's really a guest lecturer, comes once and goes away. So that's great. There is no conflict of interest.
The impression I get if I listen to you is that you have a lot of thoughts and maybe also worries and plans of what you want to do and how you want to structure that. For me, as a kind of a guinea pig at the other end, this is almost too much. I don't need to know and to understand more than what I've got. It's already at the too much end for me. At least it would be, yeah. I at this point, I don't need to know what exactly you're going to do with that and how you're going to process it and whether you're going to put it through a wash machine or you're going to dry it first and structure it afterwards. I really don't care. Okay. I mean, the only thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to be present, get connected with you in the interview enough. If I get the sense that this is not working for me, I would flag it and then we would see what is going on.
Sure.
But as long as I feel that this is working, I mean, the only thing I wanted to know is in terms of what is going to happen with the material, and I've got a good enough view on that.
Yeah.
And I really don't care whether you use quotes from me or whether you use only things that you have synthesized yourself.
Yeah.
And all this stuff with stuff I have to sign, etc. That's all fine, but that's not really the part I'm interested in.
Sure.
So what I would suggest is, why don't you just kick off now for the next 10, 20 minutes and see how it goes without a too big plan and just seeing, because you have to jump into the water anyhow. So why don't you have a little...
I can do that, but I'm not. For me, this was a call to introduce to you what I'm going to do.
And that's fine for me.
But I think why not? I think it's a good idea, and maybe it will give me a lot of learning of what not to do. So, that can also happen. Let me think, because I'm so less prepared to say, okay, so how would I even open up and how would I even ask, what would be the first question? I mean, the first question that's coming to my mind, of course, at this moment is, how do you define leadership? What do you consider is leadership? What in your mind and heart is leadership?
Okay, so if we are in the interview, I'm going to be as a little bit impolite, because I have another thing which is in my mind, which you asked me earlier, which is about the significant event and how it relates to leadership. And I'm happy to come back then to my definition later. But certainly when you were starting in your introduction, I could feel that there was that something started to get triggered inside me. And my son Robin is now 13, and certainly it has changed not only my leadership, but it has changed myself. So I think by changing myself, it then certainly also had an impact on me. So maybe to put it very, very bluntly, and maybe I can then elaborate a bit more. I would say that what has changed is that through his presence and being in my life, in our life, I have been able to open my heart in a way that I wasn't able to do so before. And I think through the special needs that he has and his handicap, he also has certain qualities that other people might not have, because you have all the civilization stuff which stands in the way. And one ability that he really has is just to be incredibly approachable and just share his feelings in the moment, or his emotions in the moment, in a very blunt and very direct and very raw way. And this is something which I have and had a lot of difficulties with. And I believe that's also something which in my leadership stood in my way, by being extremely thoughtful, diplomatic, controlled in the widest sense. And having someone who just tells you, I love you, I hate you, or whatever, without even thinking of the consequences, but just because this I love you is so much in him, has allowed me to also learn from him and to do that. And I got friends who tell me, when you're with your son, you're like a different person. And I think recently what I've started to do is also this gift, or this capability to open more my heart and to be more connected on a heart level rather than only on a brain level. I've been able to use at work and in my leadership. So that's a kind of a little excursion to my first thinking. To your question about what my view of leadership is, I guess I have a few thoughts on that. One is the simplest view I can think of is creating followership. So having people work for you, support you, and by doing that, make things happen in an organization or in a team. And I think one thing which gets often underestimated, which I believe is an important ability in leadership, is also taking decisions. I think leadership is not only about creating a good environment, creating good connection with people, but it's also destroying options. It's also making choices which will make people unhappy. So leadership is always related to making some people unhappy, because you cannot always say yes to them. But I think in order to generate followership, you need to have connection. You need to build trust. And in order to build trust, you need to be authentic and vulnerable. Show yourself vulnerable. And this is something I've been really very, very bad at. And I'm now in my personal process that I'm going through recently, and with this experience with Robin, showing myself more vulnerable, trying to overcome this pattern that I've learned as a little boy, that I need to look perfect and to I think competency for me is an important thing. I hate people which are don't come across as competent. So the price that I'm paying is that sometimes I pretend I'm competent, even though I don't feel competent. But this also the price that it creates is distance. And that has been a legacy or, kind of a burden that I had, that people did not feel they can trust me, they can connect with me, because they felt like that guy is so super competent and I'm looking really stupid and fool compared to him. That was not something I was consciously doing, but it happened. And it's happening now in my work less. But I still need to do it very consciously. And there, it's almost as if I would take Robin to work, that the interaction with him or the parts that I carry with me from him helps me to be imperfect, and to share my imperfections. Because I have, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering, you said that because it's a difference between being imperfect and sharing it, and being imperfect and not sharing it, so that whole aspect of vulnerability and authenticity is of course of, great interest, and a lot of research being done under that vulnerability piece. How do you see that, your experience with Robin is helping you to become more vulnerable? How exactly is that relationship? Is it because you're experiencing more vulnerability with him? How is it opening you up?
Probably there are many, many answers to that, but one which just comes to my mind is that there was a significant moment a few years ago where I told my wife, Doris, when I run programs, I'm sharing with my participants that I have a child with special needs, that I have a handicapped child. And she was totally surprised, if not upset, when she heard that. She said, "You cannot do that." And we had an interesting conversation around that. Why not? So to your question, I think by doing that, by sharing this fact, I noticed that things became possible which were not possible before. When I would introduce myself as someone with X years of experience and master and all my qualifications. So just by sharing how sometimes I am overwhelmed with the situation, or we are overwhelmed at home, it created a kind of a role model where then someone would start sharing about something at least as personal, significant, and private. And suddenly we would have, so my unconscious fear that I might lose my face by sharing this did not fulfill. It was rather the opposite, that suddenly I had a very meaningful, deep and personal conversation about what life can bring you and how you deal with it, and especially how you deal with it when you don't know how to deal with it because you're overwhelmed. So it was showing vulnerability led to more connection and to more credibility than it led to what my fear maybe was unconsciously. I will look imperfect. I will not look professional. That's one answer.
I'm wondering, when you say imperfect and professional and competence and incompetence, and you even spoke about that you hate incompetence.
Yep.
And I'm struggling to bring these two things together, because I'm thinking, how is now competence linked to what's happening? You know, your competence as a facilitator, as a trainer, as, you know, how is that linked in your mind? I'm trying to understand from your perspective, how is that linked even to your experience or your reality of life, which is around having a child with special needs? How did you link those two in your mind before? I see now that you've said that you know, there has been a shift, but how did you initially link the two, perfection or incompetence, with a challenge that life has thrown you?
I guess it's not more than I guess. I guess that the concept of life that I had and that I learned as a child was, I need to show how good I am. I must show how well done I am. I imagine that happened in very early years. My sister being a handicapped child as well. Especially for my mother, it was incredibly important that she could show to her environment how clever I am and how well not only well educated, but how smart I am. And I think that it's at that age that I learned, if I want to be loved, if I want to be appreciated, I need to show to my environment that I'm smart. And this smartness became then competence. And I learned, I became competent, and I learned how to behave to look competent, even if inside myself I feel highly incompetent. And so that I imagine was the kind of how all this happened. And by doing that, I also created distance, because I lost authenticity. So some of my big role models were those British guards in front of the Buckingham Palace with their black hats and all in red. Those poker faces, basically. So I was as a child there, and I looked at them and I thought, wow, they are so cool. You can do whatever you want with them. They will not have any movement in their face. And that's still something I can do today, that I learned at that early age. I can have absolutely zero mimic, zero facial expression, that no one would know what's going inside myself. And for many years, I felt that I was super proud of being able to have this total self-control. And certainly today, I think this is total crap. This is not something I aspire to do, because it is only superficial. It does not say anything of what is going inside myself. And it makes me also very lonely, being disconnected from the rest of the world by not showing what I really feel. So it's very recent that on a really very personal level, I was able to really ask for help. It was recently in a workshop where I just felt part of a personal process going on. I felt so incredibly lonely, and just go to someone and say, I need some time with you. Was an incredible step for me. I could do that easily on a professional level, but to do it from a very personal vulnerable, so that from a child ego state, that was really, really something that it hit me how difficult it was and how unable I've been for many years to really ask others for help. Because I think with this concept of being competent, looking competent, I also learned very easily, no one's going to help you. You need to help yourself.
So coming back to what you said about your mom, to get your mom's affection, that was the way you learned to be.
Yes.
Was it her projecting, or was it your belief then also that to be loved and appreciated, I need to be smart and I need to show that I'm smart? I'm just trying to understand also when you said that it's recent, because Robin, for instance, is 13 years old. So this experience is around you for a really long time. So is something else also happening that is making, these changes in you?
The current ones, you mean?
Yes.
Well, going through this 3 years program with a lot of personal inquiry and personal development work is certainly.
Which 3 years program?
I'm doing a Gestalt
I didn't
education.
know that. Okay.
It's a master's program as well, taking 3 years. In Germany, where we're meeting different kind of faculty in the German-speaking arena around Gestalt work.
And it's Gestalt psychology, is it?
Well, it's called Gestalt coaching and Gestalt therapy.
Therapy, yeah.
Therapy,
yeah. Okay.
So based on Fritz Perls and those guys. So yes, that's. But coming back to your question, about my mother and. I guess I'm not totally sure about that, but I guess the process was that I first learned a mechanism how to protect myself from a strong mother and from a mother who was also not always totally reliable in my perception. Alcohol playing a role led probably to a situation where I needed to shut off or to protect myself in order to not be totally overwhelmed by emotional states which were ambivalent or different.
Strong and unreliable.
Exactly.
Okay.
And strong, at least aggressive. Not necessarily sure about strong, but having an aggressive and unreliable impact. And there, I think it's only later that the theme of competence then came almost as a second layer. But certainly, Robin brought in a new experience, because he is exactly on the opposite side of that. He is not hiding his emotions. His frustration level is very small. So when he doesn't get what he needs, then he really becomes very emotional. And he doesn't hide his emotions. He just shows them. So that's a kind of unlearning, or unlearning is not the right term. A new experience that I've been experiencing, which is radically different from how I grew.
Yeah. What's staying with me is a little bit what you said some time back when you said this poker face and looking competent. and that you were also very proud of this total self-control. Linking that back to leadership, did you think that this, not showing anything that you feel and having the poker face would make someone a good leader at that stage in your life? Did you believe that not showing
Yes.
what you think and feel is, and now you think that's total crap?
No, that would be too black and white. Clearly, my value system has changed in the sense that I believe that vulnerability and being able to show what's going on inside yourself has become a very important value for me. But I also, if I take Bodo, for instance, Bodo is incredibly easy to read, but he has not learned in certain key moments to hold back with his emotions and hold back with his reactions. So there are sometimes certain situations which are critical, where he would love to have a little bit more of the skills that I have in that moment. That I might be very upset of a client, but I'm just tactically not going to show that in that moment because I believe it's not the right moment or not the right person or not the right time to show it. So I have the spectrum or the keyboard that I can open up my heart and be myself and show myself vulnerable, but I haven't lost that.
You haven't lost, exactly. Yeah.
That ability. And so I'm picking up on your word that I think it's crap. No, I don't think it's crap.
Well, I picked up on your word, Anton. You said,
okay, so
crap.
So you picked on my word, and I'm picking. So I'm repicking on my word.
Yeah.
So I think it's flagging it as crap is not making full justice on the context. So certainly when we talk about leadership, context is something which is very quickly an important term for me, that I think a good leader is able to use the full spectrum of possibilities, whether it's being shy and aggressive, being kind, being nasty, being slow, being fast, being totally open, being totally protected. I think the more possibilities you have in your repertoire, the better you're going to be as a leader, because you can use it in accordance to what the situation demands. While if you have only one side of the spectrum at your disposal, there will always be situations where you are using that skill because that's the only sides that you have really developed, or because you believe the other side is crap. But you will not make full justice of that situation. Do you see what I mean?
I completely get it. The bit that I'm trying to understand as you speak is around this authenticity then.
Okay.
Because how do you remain authentic to what is it that you're really thinking and feeling when you are continuously, in a way, calibrating what is needed in this context, which is, you're judging that, right? You're judging, like you gave the situation around a client, being nasty or whatever, and instead of showing that you're upset, you chose to show a different behavior because it was in your repertoire, which wasn't, for instance, in Bodo's. Now, how is that linked in your mind to authenticity?
Well, clearly I would say I am not always authentic. And I believe that this is not possible. I believe that being a human being in a social context, I am never fully transparent. I am never fully authentic. And I would really be interested in talking to a person who sees that differently. Because I guess if I'm taking the train and I'm seeing this beautiful lady there just opposite of me, and I'm thinking, it would be wonderful to having a drink with her at the beach, or even being in a hammock, or even worse with her. And
or better, right?
or better. And I'm not gonna express those fantasies in the moment. I'm not gonna go to her and say, Madam, sorry to disturb you. I am totally authentic, so just wanted to let you know I would love to have sex with you. I would not do that. And I believe we constantly have zillions of situations like this in front of a CEO where we're thinking, oh, what an ugly nose that guy has. And even if I'm totally authentic, I would never say, sir, what's about your nose? I might think that. So at least for me, I'm in a constant inner dialogue with myself. And even that dialogue, I would argue, is not a fully authentic one, because I'm sometimes even cheating myself. But there is a dialogue where I'm constantly then...
How are you cheating yourself?
Well, I don't know if you...
Oh, I lost you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I believe that there are some emotions which are so painful for me that I will have maladaptive emotions, so that I don't need to feel the original primary emotion. So you have primary emotions and secondary emotions.
Your voice is gone suddenly. I can't hear you suddenly. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, you're back. You're back. You said maladaptive, and then the voice went.
So there are primary emotions and secondary emotions. And I believe that there are certain emotions that I prefer to cheat myself rather than having to feel those.
Can you give me an example? It's a very fascinating concept.
So I have a person in front of me, and the person gives me the feeling that I'm really not competent. Rather than letting that feeling sink, I will have I will become angry against that person, make the person down, because it's easier for me to feel the anger than to feel that feeling of being incompetent.
Okay.
So it is a secondary emotion where I'm basically not being totally honest with myself. And I think that's a concept that we all have, where we are just not getting access to very deep emotions, usually of fear and usually of loneliness. So we rather we pretend something in ourselves so that we don't need to get access to those very deep, painful emotions. So anyhow, I think I'm in a constant dialogue with myself, where I'm constantly assessing how much do I want to open up, how much do I want to show from myself, and how much do I going to say. And if I'm in a first client meeting, I might not get in tears, while if I'm with good friends, I might open up in a way which allows me to show tears.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly doing that. So whether I'm in a coaching, whether I'm with clients, whether I'm with my wife, I'm constantly I don't think this is always a conscious process, but I'm in a process where I'm just checking how much proximity do I have now, and why is not more possible? And I would love to have more proximity. And why? What am I doing to inhibit this proximity or this authenticity? And then I might be able to change, and maybe not. I have one very good friend with whom I would love to have more intimacy, and we're just not able to get there. But it's not always a conscious, controllable process, but I think it is a process where I'm constantly checking how authentic am I, and is this appropriate to the situation.
So you are in the situation, and you're also watching yourself continuously. You are in that conversation, but that inner dialogue, has that meta level, or whatever you call it, which is continuously saying, what is happening between us two here?
Yes. So take our call. I'm noticing how the quality has shifted since we started our conversation. I also noticed how I felt when you gave me in the introduction, and where it became to me a bit too heavy on process and stuff to sign and schedule meetings, etc. Where I felt like, well, I'm getting disinterested. But I noticed the impact it had on me. I noticed the impact it had on me when you were talking a lot about you, and I was wondering, so is this now about you or about me? I was noticing those things, and I then process also, is that something I want to raise or not? And at a certain point I will, and at others I won't. So yes, I feel more or less there is a kind of a self-observation process that I recognize in me, and sometimes it's also less useful, and then I also try to switch it off if I can, because I just want to be in the moment, enjoying this wonderful piece of cake without having to process on a meta level what I'm doing with this cake just now.
And that inner dialogue, that processing, you've always done it, is it? Or is that something that's relatively recent for you?
No, that's something which has been a part of me for many years.
So that's not necessarily linked to the Robin experience. That's something that you've done.
Rather in the opposite. I think that when I'm disconnected from someone, it is then easier inside myself to have this kind of, so what's going on, and oh, poor thing, I'm totally isolated again, or whatever the dialogue might be. While there are moments with Robin and with other people where I feel like, boom, this is hitting me so much and so directly into the heart that there is not even memory space to process. But it's just, the experience is just becoming the experience. And the processing or reflecting comes then later.
Do you do a lot of like post-conversation reflections, Anton? Do you journal? Do you process it, of course, with your therapist? I don't know how regular that is. Is that?
Yes, I have been doing some journaling. I've stopped with it, and now I started again. Yes, I do, but not regularly.
Now I'm curious again around, coming back to the question with leadership and thinking around, is that something that supports becoming a more effective leader? The whole process of reflecting on action, reflecting during action, which is something that you have mentioned, but also maybe reflecting after something has happened, and how that may or may not support, becoming a more effective leader.
Well, I guess I have two answers to that. The first answer is a kind of a general perspective I have more as a leadership practitioner. There's certainly, I believe, that reflection in action, reflection after action, is a skill that is helpful to understand what's going on, to see what could be what is your part contributing to the situation, and what might be the contribution from others, and how does it play. So that's one part of the answer. On a personal level, for me personally, I see the danger that I can overdo that, because the reflection is standing in the way of having the full experience. And
reflection during action, you mean? During
action.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
During action. So I believe it's also a skill, at least for me as a leader, to be fully present in the moment without having one foot outside of the process and one inside of it. But I guess, well, I'm just having quite a significant conflict with a business partner of mine, and he was just writing me an email the other day with expressions that I was just amazed. I would never, ever write an email with in this kind of emotional state. So what I'm taking out of that is that I think I have very strong control mechanisms or filters, which will not let me put all the inner energy that I have into an email or shouting at someone. There will always be a part of me which is still in control of the situation, which will stay stop. Before you do that, think if you really want to have this in writing for the rest of your life. Or before you say this to your boss. So I had the situation with Jan at Swiss Re, who was very emotional, and he there were a few moments where he would just totally forget his control, and then he would regret things that he said. I rarely regret things that I've said, but as a flip side, you will probably rarely experience 100% of my emotional energy in the words that I'm throwing to you.
Because you are filtering, either consciously or unconsciously, you're filtering based on your inner dialogue of, is this you? I don't know. I mean, the filtering aspect, like you said, because you did mention that you're almost sometimes not able to control it, right? It just happens. Yeah. It's just a part of you.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating, because it does, in Buddhism, actually, the aspect that you mentioned around watching yourself from a meta position is appreciated. It's something that, is considered to be a quality to be cultivated. And at the same time, it's fascinating that you mentioned that it can be too much of a good thing again, because in terms of this whole aspects around presence and embodiment, and all of these concepts that are very basic to Gestalt, it can, you will not be, right? I mean, it's impossible to be fully present if at the same time you're looking at yourself. That's fascinating. I have asked you because I knew about the Robin situation. Have there been other significant life events that have shifted your perspective?
my perspective on leadership.
Your perspective on leadership and change you as an individual. Because now I'm thinking, this, in some ways, of course, I want to bring it to leadership because, it has to be an academic piece of work. But what you said right in the beginning has really stayed with me because I remember a conversation with Hartmut Stulten many years back where he actually said that I don't do leadership development or something like that. He had said that he had spoken about, do you remember all those years ago in Swiss Re, we had this project when I was still there around transfer of learning, and ROI and, the Kirkpatrick and the fifth level and all of that, right? And there was some conversation with Hartmut many years ago where he said, I don't, care about all of these things because I change the person. And once the person transforms, of course, everything around them transforms, right? So that's why when you said leadership, leadership is one bucket, but a life event probably changes you as a person, as an individual, and then it manifests itself in many ways. One of those ways is how effective are you as a leader? Today I think a lot of leaders are, considered to be change agents, right? So it's really about then looking at what, leading and decision making, but also leading from a more influencing and impacting change level, So, you can have different roles of leadership, of course. Yeah, but coming back to that question then, have there been other significant events in your life that changed you as a person?
Well, certainly my transition away from Swiss Re was one of these, because in almost 20 years of career at Swiss Re, even though I did various jobs and similar but not equal roles, in the hindsight, I never really fully felt in the driving seat. So the Swiss Re world was changing that much that I would maybe change, from Zurich to Adliswil or from Adliswil to Richlicon. But it was all in my comfort zone, while saying I'm gonna cut this I'm gonna get out of that golden cage, and I'm gonna become independent, was significant, even though I was driving that change myself rather than being part of a bigger system where the system was changing. And there were a few triggers. So certainly having a boss which treated me in a special way, which I felt treated me in a disrespectful way, in a non-appreciative way, in a manipulative way, had an enormous impact on me in terms of, and I knew all that in theory, but to experience it myself, how much my boss has an impact on me and my performance in the widest sense, was very important. And it was also important in terms of recognizing how poisonous I felt the environment was that I was in. So you asked me about Stacy and my view on social construction earlier. I knew that we all construct our world, but it was fascinating to be sitting at my office table, still at Swiss Re, and suddenly looking at my job, at my past, my professional past, at the organization, in a really radically different way that I did before I decided to leave.
How did it change? How did it change? How did you look at it now?
Well, and it's not necessarily now, it was at that time.
At that time.
I was able to be much more critical and to have almost taking a position outside of Swiss Re and looking at what have you been doing there while in the job, because for me it was not an option to leave because I was too anxious. I was too scared. I would be mourning around, but I was not ready to allow real deep criticism get into myself. While once I took that decision, it suddenly felt so different. Like, I don't need this anymore. It feels really unhealthy to me. Before that decision, I would never have thought that I was in an unhealthy environment. Never. It would not have occurred to me. While once I took that decision, there were moments where I was really leaving at 3 p.m. and thinking, this is going so against what I would like to do and how I feel.
And again, there is nothing around competence in this picture, right? This is really about a relationship with a person, because I don't think after all those years, your competence could be doubted really, right? What you were delivering, it was impacting your performance, but what you co-created with this person was somehow leading to that unhealthy situation, I imagine.
Well, and for me, the bigger system was unhealthy. So I'm thinking of the politics, trying to look good, trying to camouflage certain things which were not working well, pretending how great we are. So that was also part of the unhealthy piece. But certainly the core piece was having a boss who was not appreciating what I do and wanting me to do something differently than I was convinced about.
And I imagine with your profile, you have had conversations around that with him, right?
Yes, we had many conversations. And that at the end, I would say, this model of meaning, value, structure, it was all about value. It was all about being appreciated for what I believe in, of what I have done, of what I can do. And on all those levels, I felt he was trying to minimize the value of our work. He was trying to minimize the impact of the work. He was trying to put down the legacy or the impact we had, because he wanted to go to a model which was more the business school model. That was the kind of the core of the conflict. But
so a different worldview from him.
Different worldview, and yes, in terms of what works and what doesn't, but certainly also different interests. So he was trying to, he asked me to do things which from a political perspective made total sense, expanding our influence, but from a role perspective didn't make any sense to me. And there I was constantly we were in a clash about those kind of different worldviews, as you call it.
I don't know this model. What is this meaning value structure? Is that a model around how leaders are again?
Yes. Yes. So it's funny that you don't know it, because it was originally used a lot at Impact.
Really?
So that's one part of it. That's called Notice, Decide, Act.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of that?
This I think I have seen, yes.
So that's related to the other one, meaning, value, structure, which is here. Well, I can send you pictures afterwards. And here it is.
Do you know who created it?
Yeah, Richard Little.
Richard Little created it. Okay.
So that's the structure piece.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yes, I can. Usually people.
So that's all about roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
And then you have concrete actions that you can take. So actions to frame space and time, actions to restore movement and prevent distraction, actions to restore roles, resources, and responsibilities, and to reduce group dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
That's the structure piece. But then the one I'm referring to is the value piece.
You don't need to show it to me now, Antoine. Is that something where there is a paper or something that I can refer back to? Is that
you mean a published?
Yeah,
No.
published? No?
Yeah, I don't think so. No.
Because I think NCAP never published anything like a book, like Nowhere did or other people did, right?
So we used it, and I have a paper I can give you, but that's not one which is written by the author himself. It's stuff that we've put together based on the sessions we did years ago.
Okay, but it's a paper which explains what it is.
Yes, yeah.
That would be very helpful because, I'm not sure I exactly understood what you said when you said that he was trying to, So again, coming back to the significant life event,
yes,
you have encountered a person who is disaligned with you in terms of the value they offer you.
Yes.
I'm still not understanding that because I don't know that model really.
Sure. So what the model says is that as human beings, we want to be seen for what we do.
Yeah, we want to be validated, right? Yeah.
We want to be validated for what we do.
Yeah.
Even if it's a negative sense, it doesn't necessarily mean just compliments.
Mm.
But as an employee at that time, I felt not valued in terms of someone who recognized what I've done, what I've developed, and the impact that it had.
Yeah.
Because, of course, he wanted to do something different. His strategy was to put down and minimize the value and the impact of what we had done before. And that then created the emotion in me, I don't want to work for someone who doesn't validate or that doesn't appreciate what I stand for and what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And the rest I can, I made a note. I can.
What about the meaning bit of that though? Is that linked to the value bit? Is it supporting somebody in meaning making?
Well, so the model says the three things that can go wrong is that meaning is missing. People don't understand why they should do something.
Like the purpose.
Purpose, exactly. Okay. Purpose is not there. People are not valued, and there is no structure in terms of roles.
Okay.
So others have called it purpose, people, process.
Yeah. That I have heard. Purpose, people, process. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that it's sufficient for me for the moment.
But it was a nice experiment, and I think it's.
Yes.
It felt to me that it was, once we were into it, you were basically just asking your questions out of the moment rather than having an interview.
Which I think is probably what I will do ultimately. I just want to know what to do ultimately. What is required, you see, because of course this is an academic exercise, as amazingly interesting as it is, because I would love to have this conversation even if it was not an academic exercise.
Yeah, sure.
So, and I feel it's been a very rich conversation. I'm so happy that I have recorded it, because I'm seeing in my notes already as I read them. I was making a lot of notes, but as I read them, I'm like, oh my God, what have I written, you know? So it's great that I could record it. And I think thank you not only for giving me that time, but actually challenging me to say, you know, why don't you jump into it right now, you know, instead of just waiting with, you know, what it is, et cetera, et cetera. So thanks. I think that's very, very insightful. And I will come back to you. I will come back to you with, you know, after I've made a bit more sense of this and, you know, knowing more about where I'm going with this. Yeah.
So would you like to fix another date, or will you come to me later for that?
Let's fix another date, because you are very busy, I know. And I am also unusually busy because of a few things happening. So shall we put something towards the end of October? So last week of October?
Yes, I could do on the 31st. 31st, I could do something there on Monday.
Perfect. Time like today, like, you know, 10, or no, today it was 11, but what
11
time?
would be, 11 would be
11?
good. I have would that work?
Yeah, that would work. It's good to have a little bit more time than an hour, I've realized. You don't have a lunch appointment or something, right?
No. So, yeah, I'm going to put 90 minutes from 11 to 12:30. Is that okay?
Perfect.
Okay.
I'll send you